Hi, everyone. Welcome to A New View. I'm Shira, and I'm here with Kim, Lee, and Juji. We are four friends, speakers, and professionals from different cultures, backgrounds, and age groups coming together to offer healing and inspiration. Today, we're going to talk about dysfunctional relationships. So I figured I would start us off with sort of a definition. So what I came across is dysfunctional relationships are relationships that do not perform their appropriate function. That is, they do not emotionally support the participants, foster communication among them, appropriately challenge them, or prepare or fortify them for life in the larger world. So basically everybody, basically all of the families, is there one family we know that doesn't have that sensibility in some way, shape, or form? I think not, but I will open it up to the group. What do we think?
I think I have to agree with you, Shira. I think there's probably some underlying dysfunction on some level within every relationship. I could be wrong though, but I haven't met one yet. I'm going to focus for me on family dysfunction. Growing up as a kid, I never knew that I had a dysfunctional family, like literally wasn't aware. And I remember when I was 16 and I went to therapy for the first time, and this woman like opened up my whole world and, just got me to understand what was going on in my house. So once I had that understanding, I was able to sort of start to make sense of everything. And I started to notice that the big thing I noticed was that there was this enormous pink elephant in the room that no one talked about, which was my dad's drinking problem. And my mom didn't act well to this. They would fight all the time violently. My mom would throw dishes. She would run out onto the lawn sobbing. She would get in her car and drive off and like not come back for hours. And me and my two sisters, we were really young at the time. And my dad just had this habit of being reclusive, and he would go into his room and just, there was no communication. My mom didn't come home, sit us down and say, I'm really sorry that I left. This is what I was feeling. This is why. It was like, go to bed. Like she'd come home and say, go to bed, get upstairs. And that was it. So it just was never, ever talked about. And that's something that for anyone listening, there's a ton of signs if your family is dysfunctional. But the biggest sign for me that I learned through therapy, thank goodness, was there was no communication. Therefore, there was no understanding anything. There was confusion. There was shame, tons of shame, and hopelessness. And, if you have communication, I really try to practice healthy communication in my relationships today, because I really see the importance of it from my childhood. So I really try my best to practice, even sometimes when it's even painful. I still muster up the words to express myself so that the other person in my life, whether it be my husband or my mom or whoever, have a full understanding of what I'm feeling and maybe why I'm behaving that way. But I really learned this from when I was a child. And healthy communication is key to a healthy relationship, so.
I have a question about that. So when you were experiencing this and you said your mom really never said anything about it or spoke about it, did you guys ever ask like what's going on, and were you hushed?
We were never hushed, but no, we never asked what was going on. I think me and my two sisters were just a little, when we were younger, like little girls, I think we just didn't know any better. And then as we got older, I feel like the only person I really brought it up to was my therapist. And I didn't talk about it with friends because I was just too ashamed. I was so embarrassed that my dad was drunk. I wouldn't have them over my house. I hid it. So that was my tendency through life with a lot of things. You guys know I hid my, the skin issue that I have. I hid that for years too. So I learned this way of hiding shameful feelings and shameful behavior, so no, it just wasn't talked about. And then when I went to therapy at 16 and she brought this all out, I went home and I was the first person in my family. My sisters were older than me, But I went home and said, we have to talk about this. Do you guys realize how messed up this is? And I just started to talk about it with my siblings, and then eventually my mom and my dad, and I would just start to slowly open up.
That's how you break the cycle. That's how you break the cycle.
Yeah, I broke the cycle. Thank goodness I broke the cycle. Yeah. And and by the way, they didn't want to talk about it. Nobody wanted to talk about it.
Of course, they never.
Easier not to.
It is. Yeah.
Well, I feel like what you brought up is so important, Kim, in terms of like not talking about it and like putting up this facade, because I would guess that most people in your life, like your friends and your teachers, thought that like everything was fine at home as a result. So that's why you didn't really know that it was a dysfunctional family, because your parents were still married and they were living in the same house. And it's just what happened behind closed doors. You don't know what's going on behind closed doors with other people. So this could just be normal, right? Like this could just be how it is. For me, it was a little bit different because there was no hiding the fact that my parents were divorced, and even though we talked a lot in our family, because my mom's a therapist, there was still a lot of issues there that like I knew were not normal, right? Like it's not just that they got a divorce and like went their separate ways and everything was fine. It was like, okay, we're getting divorced seemingly in a, fine way, like not, it wasn't great. Like they fought a lot before they got divorced, but when they finally did get divorced, we thought like, phew, it's over. Like everything's going to be fine now. Like there was a sense for me of relief in that. But no, that's not where it ended. So my parents ended up in like a huge custody battle over us. And anytime that I see that now in other families, I'm like, oh my God, for Pete's sake, please stop. I understand that you are in a terrible position as adults together, but like I went through 5 years of that, of like being in and out of court and depositions, and I had my own lawyer, and we had to be psychologically evaluated to see if like my mom was brainwashing us and all of these different things. And it got pretty much as nasty as it gets. Like, I started watching that movie, Marriage Story on Netflix, and I had to turn it off. I was like so triggered, like, no, make it stop. Like, because even though there was plenty of talking in my household, it didn't negate the fact that this was going on in the background on a very regular basis. And then like finally the court made its decision after literally 5 years of this. And it had been decided that my brothers should go live with my dad full time. And so I was too old for that by then, because I was about to turn 18. I was 17 going on 18. And at that point you are able to say like who you want to stay with. And like that set off like a whole other course of events that became really difficult to deal with. I'm probably still processing that, to be honest with you. Some of those memories have been coming up for me lately. And it's just like, so it was obvious to me that this was a dysfunctional situation. And even talking about it didn't really make it better. I understood sort of the underlying pain points of my parents' marriage. I kind of felt like I was shouldering some of that blame because I was the reason they got married in the first place. So there's a lot that goes on behind closed doors. This was not something I could hide. It was like all of my friends knew what was going on. And I hated seeing like the pity in their eyes of like, you know, like, oh, poor you. And I'm like, well, this had nothing to do with me. You know what I mean? I'm just stuck in the middle of it. And it was painful and, you know, sort of out of my control. It was out of my hands. And to feel that out of control when the world already feels so out of control as a teenager was just not, was not healthy, I can tell. But I've definitely learned so much about what I don't want in relationship as a result of it. And you guys are so on point, like communication, communication, communication.
Sushi, just, I know you're very close with your mom today. And like you said, she was a psychologist. Does she ever, when you guys communicate now, and now that, you're older and past all of that, does she feel any regret for, because like it's so hard for kids to go through a divorce, let alone getting sort of dragged through this 5-year or longer court battle and all these things. Like that sounds so traumatizing for someone who's young. Like, does your mom ever express to you that she feels badly that, because out of all people, she probably has a better idea than anybody how that's must impacted you. So does she, I don't know, does she have regret about that?
I know that she does. I feel like something that kind of ended up being a pathology in my family is that most of that came from my father. And so like there's a lot of forgiveness that's happened over the years. I feel like that was a big thing that I got from Landmark, is just understanding that my parents are people, they're fallible human beings with like their own stuff, their own like family stuff, their own personal things. Like it's the hardest thing in the whole world to step back and not take that personally. Even though I was so involved, even though I was such a big part of this, scenario, it really had not a whole lot to do with me. It was, and that's really difficult to like internalize even, but that's really one of the big things that came out of Landmark, because, what happened and what I made it mean about me are two very different things. Like Kim, like your father's drinking had nothing to do with you. You were in the crossfire of what happened, but that wasn't your burden to bear, nor was your mom's like inability to communicate your burden to bear. It was just where you ended up. And if we're going to get real spiritual about it, it's like, these are the lessons that we had to learn. Like, these are the soul contracts that we made before we came here. And it's, it's something that we're still working through in this lifetime, but like, that's what we came to do. We came to heal these things. So for you, it might be shame. For me, it might be insecurity. Who knows? But I would say we're doing a pretty good job working on it.
No,
Gotta do the work.
we sure
That's the
are.
truth.
Gosh, there's so much to this subject, and thank you guys for sharing your stories. I'm not going to share too much. I also had dysfunction in my family, and it was also something that was not apparent growing up. And I don't think anyone really as a child knows or realizes that there is any dysfunction going on, because that's all right? We're in our little bubble. This is how we're being raised. This is what we're experiencing and observing, until you get out there in the world and hear about other families and see other families and truly start to either compare or realize that the things that you were going through may have not necessarily been normal or good, and I think of dysfunction as like, it could also be, it's something we perceive as not good or not good to us. It doesn't feel good. And in that same line of thought, I think that if we were to observe any family growing up, right? If I was to observe yours, Juge, or yours, Kim, I am sure that I can also highlight some things that are amazing that I lacked. And then some dysfunctions that you may have or may not have even realized. I think it's just phenomenal that there is a huge spectrum of dysfunctions. And I also think that we never do know what goes on behind closed doors. We never do know really what's happening. And especially today with social media, with so many people's lives appearing to be perfect and the grass is always greener on the other side. I think that one of the most important things is if there is dysfunction or if there's dysfunction that's realized, is to work on it, and like we said before, communication. I know, for example, my parents had no tools for communicating the way that we talk about communicating today, right? They were in a whole different mindset. They came from a whole different culture. They came to this country to make it. And whatever I have discovered later on that would be a dysfunction, they probably would never see it as a dysfunction. It was like they did everything they thought would be good and different from how maybe they were raised and what they lacked, in the same way that I did that for my son. Whatever I didn't get from my parents, I did for my son. And that was a lot of attention and a lot of nurturing and I'll be there and I'm here and I'm present. I wasn't starting a business and being so busy all the time, trying to become successful in that way at the time. But who's to know what's right and what's wrong? I mean, I think it's again, to me, it's all a matter of perception and how we see it and how, our children grow up and see it may be totally different,
100%.
And they have probably been observing different dysfunctions or dysfunctions that we're not aware of.
Well, do you guys remember oh, sorry, Lee.
It's okay. Go
Oh,
ahead.
finish what you were going to say.
I
Lost my train of thought. That's okay. I'll take the next one. Do you guys remember the Rosanna character from Saturday Night Live? She was like, it's always something. If it's not one thing, it's another. Either you have this or you have that. It's just this very funny character. And it just reminded me that we're like all in this together, like if we could all just like put our facades down and go, you have dysfunction, I have dysfunction. Like that's just the way it is. Cause like Brene Brown, who we all love, talks about how we are hardwired, even as children, for struggle. Like we have to know that we're capable to overcome, to become more aware, to have clarity in our lives because we're hardwired for it. And the thing is, I don't know that many families that model the behavior. Like Kim, when you were talking about, nobody in your family talked about it, that it was not modeled for you. Like you wouldn't even know to communicate about these things because everything was just hush hush. In my family, there was communication. And that's why, like, in my mind, I'm like, we need to differentiate between communication and communication, right? Like my parents talked a lot, but they talked in circles. It was unproductive communication. So it's not like they went to their corners and nobody talked for days, although that did happen too, a lot of grudge holding. But when they did talk, it was just like, I would literally close my ears. I'm like, I cannot listen to one more word of this because no one's hearing each other. They're just not listening to each other. And so we don't teach empathy in schools. We don't teach about communication and compromise and conflict resolution. Like we don't necessarily intentionally talk about these things, because if you're not getting it in at home and you're not getting it in school, like where are you getting it from? You're just not going to.
Yeah. Well,
So
and some of these things are innate, some of these things we just have, and they're innate and they're so natural. But you're right, there's a lot that needs to be taught.
yeah, and like just like we go to a doctor when like we're not going to self-diagnose and know what medications to take or what to do to have a healthier lifestyle. Like I didn't start therapy until I was 54 years old. What the hell was I waiting for? But again, I was also hiding in shame because my parents didn't know how to talk about emotions. My parents had a very not healthy marriage at all. So that's what was modeled for me. I also said, well, when I get married, I'm going to do things differently. And it's like, I did, but I also did some similar crap because you just unconsciously take it with you. So unless you're willing to put your bag of your heavy bag of all the things that have happened to you down and go, all right, let me open it up. Let me dissect, let me unpack, let me look at this crap pile that's there. Because otherwise you're just going to keep schlepping it around and complaining about it and doing the same thing over and over again. It's just nuts. So I hope that things evolve over time and that like our children are smarter than we were and that there's healthier communication in the next generation. But if we don't model it, and you can do that at any point in your life, right? Like there's never a bad time to start over. And that's the good news. The good news is if we get the help, if we seek and search, if we read, if we watch videos, if we read articles, if we get therapy, like all of those things help us to see things that we cannot see. And we all have it. We all have it. It would be so nice if we just all put our guns down and go, yeah, empathy. It's just all about empathy.
I just also, something that occurred to me is that like we see like what went on with our parents in terms of like how they communicated or like how they handled certain things. Like the thing that I do have a lot of gratitude for is that I never questioned whether or not my mom loved me. Like that was not even a thought that ever crossed my mind, because that was the one thing that was like most important to her that she may not have necessarily gotten from like her parents, is just this like underlying, not even questionable aspect. And like, I know that we all have experienced that. So like, that isn't a part of our like pain points. It's how do we take like loving somebody and then also doing right by them? How do you love and also like have a mutually functional relationship that is built on that foundation of love, but has these pillars of communication and empathy and kindness also to hold it up,
I think we just, we can only do our best, because what you just asked is that's like the magic question. How do we do it where whoever we're with is not feeling dysfunction? How do we do that? That's out of our control. And it can be other influences that cause that and not ourselves too.
Well, I love the phrase, stay curious, not furious. That's always helped me. I'm just like, and it goes back to our other episode about asking powerful questions. We just don't do that enough, in my opinion.
And I always believe, and some people may not agree, and that's okay, but I always believe that every person on this planet does the best they could do for where they're at emotionally. So Shira, you mentioned, learning empathy and all of these ways to handle our emotions being, in school or at home. If you're not learning it in either place, you're not learning it. So whatever dysfunction is going on from your childhood forward, you might have zero awareness. You might just grow up with all these ways it's impacted you that, steal your joy and give you, create more struggle in your life. and the key is like learning it when you're young and being able to have that connection with yourself and learn how to manage your emotions and find the awareness and all these things. So, I know we're all meant to be on our own journeys and learn all these lessons, and without dysfunction, I don't think we'd be able to learn all these lessons. So it's not a bad thing either. But I think the awareness and the communication is definitely 2 key points. But it's really good I have to say, this was a wonderful episode because it really helped me look at my own childhood again, all these years later. And there was a lot of stuff that I saw for the first time that I haven't seen, I think, ever. So it's nice to, from the outside in years later, just take a look at what was really going on to understand it better.
Absolutely. Yeah. Same for me, Kim. And, it's like, I remember years as an adult, looking back and saying, yeah, there was dysfunction there when I really, there was nothing that really stood out. Nobody got abused. There was no alcoholism in my home or drug taking but but there are so many other things that, that qualify as dysfunction. And it could be the keeping quiet or no communication or hiding things, or you start to feel shame about certain things that it's like, in my family, there was a lot of hush hush. Like if somebody was sick, it's like you didn't talk about it, or, things like that,
Yay, dysfunction. Woo! Dysfunction function. What's your function? Sorry. Well, I would say, and I hope you agree, that this is a good place to wrap. So if you've enjoyed our conversation, please subscribe to our channel and be sure to let us know if you have any topic requests or questions by commenting below. We'll see you soon. Have a great day and thank you for watching.